Have you ever felt like the world respects the wrong kind of intelligence? You've read the books, followed the rules, maybe even collected a few achievements, but still, there are moments when you feel unseen, misunderstood, outpaced by people who speak less, know less, yet somehow move through life with ease. They seem to read the room, adapt without effort, and shape their reality without asking permission. And you wonder, what are they seeing that I don't? In the teachings of the Stoics, wisdom is not just found in thoughts, but in action, in observation, and in the ability to adjust with clarity. There isn't one way to be intelligent. True intelligence isn't a score, a degree, or a clever phrase. It's the ability to move through the world with presence, purpose, and self-command. In this video, we'll explore 3 distinct ways of seeing, deciding, and responding to life. 3 forms of inner strength that, when practiced together, unlock not just respect from others, but peace within yourself. So if you've ever felt like there's a deeper way to live, stay with me. What comes next might not be loud, but it just might be what you've been needing to hear. 1. See through before you step in. Have you ever made a decision that felt right in the moment, only to realize later, with quiet shame, that you were played? That someone saw through your desire, your weakness, your eagerness to believe, and used it against you? Most people have. It doesn't mean you're broken, it means you trusted without training. And in this world, if you don't train your perception, someone else will train it for you. The Stoics taught us that the mind is not simply for thinking, it is for seeing. If you are pained by external things, wrote Marcus Aurelius, it is not they that disturb you, but your judgment of them, and it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now. That's not just philosophy. That's the beginning of strategic wisdom. To understand what happens when judgment is absent, let's revisit one of the most cunning cons in modern history. In 1925, the Eiffel Tower had fallen into disrepair. Maintenance costs were skyrocketing, and rumors swirled that it might be sold for scrap. Enter Victor Lustig, the master of deceit. He posed as a government official and offered to sell the Eiffel Tower to a wealthy but insecure scrap dealer named André. Among all potential buyers, Lustig chose him carefully, not because he was rich, but because he was eager to be seen as powerful. Victor offered him a special deal, painted it with urgency, and made it sound exclusive. Within days, Victor disappeared to Vienna with a fortune in hand, while André was left humiliated, his reputation shattered. André didn't lack intelligence, he lacked judgment. He didn't question his own desire. He didn't pause to observe. And that's where the first pillar of practical intelligence lives, in the ability to see clearly before acting, to detect the hook behind the bait. The warrior doesn't step into the trap because he wants victory. He steps around it because he sees through the illusion. Practical wisdom is not about cleverness, it's about clarity. You don't need to know every trick in the book. You only need to know how people use desire, fear, and flattery to control perception. The Stoics didn't use terms like cognitive bias, but they warned constantly of false impressions, those mental shortcuts we lean on when we're tired, anxious, or trying too hard to belong. You'll notice it in yourself. When someone compliments you too quickly, when urgency clouds your breath, when the first offer feels like the best one simply because it's the first. You're not weak for feeling that. It just means your instincts are louder than your discernment. But discernment can be trained. Train yourself to pause. Ask, who benefits if I act without reflection? What am I not seeing clearly here? Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. The same is true with manipulation. If someone tricks you, they used your own impulses to do it. They didn't overpower your will, they borrowed it. But that's only half the equation. Strategic wisdom also requires movement. Once you've seen clearly, you must adjust accordingly. Seneca once wrote, "A good character, when tested, becomes stronger." And nowhere is that more important than in how you adapt in real time. There's a system used by fighter pilots called the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. It's not a psychological trick, it's a discipline of responsiveness. You observe the present moment without distortion. You orient yourself according to your goal. You decide without panic. And then you act, swiftly and with intention. But you don't stop there. You repeat the loop. You stay awake. You stay responsive. Imagine you're in a conversation and someone suddenly disrespects you. Your instincts scream to react, to snap back, to restore your pride. But if you pause, observe their words, orient toward your inner values, decide on the response that preserves your strength, and act without emotional haste, you've just outmaneuvered them without ever raising your voice. That's OODA. That's stoic adaptability in the battlefield of daily life. You won't always get it right. That's fine. What matters is that you no longer live blind. What matters is that you begin to see, not just the world, but the games within it. And more importantly, the parts of yourself that those games seek to exploit. Your craving to be liked, your fear of being left behind, your thirst to prove your worth. To master this form of intelligence is to become a quiet strategist, a calm observer, a warrior of perception. The world no longer catches you off guard, not because you know everything, but because you question everything. You no longer believe every smile, chase every opportunity, or answer every call. You stand back, breathe, and see it all for what it truly is, not what you wish it were. This is the first kind of intelligence. It lives in your judgment and your response. It is the armor of the mind and the sword of stillness, but it cannot carry you alone. To walk the path with clarity, you'll also need imagination, and not the kind that distracts, but the kind that rebuilds. Let's talk about the second form of intelligence. 2. Shape with stillness, not noise. Have you ever stood at the edge of a problem so massive, so tangled, that your mind froze not because you were incapable, but because every familiar solution failed you? That silence, where nothing makes sense, is where most people panic. But a warrior of the mind knows that silence is not the end. It's the beginning of something more ancient than logic, the quiet spark of creative truth. The Stoics didn't write books about innovation, but they understood deeply that life demands renewal. Seneca once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." In other words, when the old ways no longer serve you, you don't retreat, you imagine better ones. That's not mere creativity. That's disciplined invention, not art for art's sake, but action born from vision. 30 years ago, Japan faced a strange crisis. The bullet train, a marvel of speed and engineering, had one glaring flaw. Every time it shot through a tunnel, it created a deafening sonic boom, startling wildlife, disturbing passengers, and shaking the quiet villages that lined its path. The engineers tried everything: redesigns, insulation, minor tweaks. Nothing worked. Progress was hitting a wall, until one man, A.G. Nakatsu, stood still long enough to see something no one else had noticed. He watched a kingfisher dive into a stream, fast, smooth, almost silent. No splash, no chaos, just harmony between movement and the shape of nature. That was the answer. The kingfisher's beak became the blueprint for the train's new nose. With a single stroke of inspiration, the noise vanished, speed improved, and energy consumption dropped. Not because they added more complexity, but because they saw nature more clearly. Creation, then, was not invention, it was remembrance. And that is the essence of Stoic creativity. You don't force brilliance, you uncover it. You don't wait for divine genius, you combine what already exists in unseen ways. Just like Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look beneath the surface. Let not the surface things dazzle you. Look beneath." In today's world, we mistake creativity for originality. But the truth is, nothing is truly new. Da Vinci studied the wings of birds to sketch his flying machines. Samuel Morse used his knowledge of painting and composition to shape the visual logic of Morse code. The Stoics would smile at this, not because it's clever, but because it follows the law of nature: observe, understand, imitate with purpose. Even now, this principle lives in you. You've had moments when, without warning, a new solution popped into your head. Maybe it was late at night when you were half tired, your mind no longer clinging so tightly to structure. In those moments, you weren't thinking harder, you were thinking freer. That's no accident. The mind, when not controlled by fear or urgency, finds strange and beautiful connections. But here's where Stoic discipline comes in. True creative intelligence is not just about the idea, it's about the refinement. Anyone can mimic. But to create with honor, you must never copy out of laziness. You must extract the principle behind the form and reshape it into something of your own. As the Stoics might say, creation, in the Stoic sense, isn't theft, it's transformation. There's a saying passed down through artists and philosophers alike: steal like an artist. But I would offer a better phrase: shape like a Stoic. Take what's useful, cut what's excessive, add only what serves the essence. Creation becomes a form of character, not just talent. And remember this: if you truly want to master a skill, don't just look at its surface, return to its source. If you're a communicator, study not just speaking, but silence. If you're a builder, study not just tools, but nature's architecture. As Alex Hormozy once said in a different context, greatness requires that you study the roots, not just the branches. The Stoics would agree: first, know the cause of things. So what does this mean for you today? It means that when you face a dead end, don't retreat, and don't just keep hammering the wall harder. Step back, breathe, watch, listen. Let your mind expand, not with noise, but with quiet absorption. Take walks, read old books, study birds, rivers, paintings, ruins. Let the world feed you, not with answers, but with patterns. Then return and reframe your problem from a new shape, not to impress the world, but to restore harmony between who you are and what must be done. This form of intelligence is not about being artistic. It's about being flexible, perceptive, and unafraid to borrow from unlikely places. It's about allowing silence to become insight, and insight to become action. You honor what came before by reshaping it with care, not copying it out of convenience. You're here to build, to shape, to bring order from complexity without needing applause. That's Stoic creative discipline, not the storm of expression, but the still fire that reshapes the future. And yet, vision alone is not enough. Even if you see clearly and imagine deeply, you still need one final force to anchor everything you do: the ability to think without distortion, to cut through illusion, and to stand in the face of contradiction without losing clarity. Let's move on to the third form of intelligence: rational clarity. 3. Cut through illusion with clarity. Have you ever felt overwhelmed, not by noise, but by too many choices, too much complexity, too many opinions pulling at your mind? That strange paralysis where you're not lost in confusion, but buried under the weight of trying to make the right decision. In those moments, it's not information you lack, it's clarity. The Stoics believed that clarity is not a gift from the gods, it is a habit of the disciplined mind. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, Marcus Aurelius reminds us. What you allow to influence your thinking, rumors, assumptions, false impressions, will shape the very lens through which you see the world. If that lens is cloudy, so is your life. Rational clarity, then, is not a passive trait. It is the result of ongoing self-mastery, and it is the third kind of intelligence you must cultivate to walk the path of truth. Let's ground this in something real. In business, philosophy, or everyday problem-solving, some of the most effective minds don't simply think harder, they think deeper. Elon Musk, for example, doesn't look at industries the way most people do. He uses what is called first principles thinking. But the Stoics would recognize this method instantly, because at its core, it's about stripping away illusion to reach the essence. Here's how it works. Step 1, break things down. Let's say you want to reinvent how people eat. Most would ask, how do we improve restaurants? But a clearer question is, what is a restaurant really? At its essence, it's a place where food is made and delivered to people. That's it. Step 2, challenge the assumptions. Do people really need to sit inside a building to eat food? What if the restaurant didn't serve customers directly, but simply focused on preparing meals? What if the seats, the staff, the decorations were all distractions from the core function? Step 3, rebuild from the ground up. Now you imagine not one restaurant with tables, but dozens of simple kitchens connected to an online platform. No dining area, no waiters, just focused efficiency. That's how Travis Kalanick created Cloud Kitchens, a company now worth billions. Not because he was clever, but because he saw clearly while others saw habit. That's the gift of rational clarity. It cuts through noise. It removes what is unnecessary. It asks, what is this, really? And then it begins again from the ground. The Stoics didn't build apps or restaurants, but they applied this exact thinking to life. Epictetus told his students to ask, again and again, is this in my control? If it was not, he let it go. If it was, he took full responsibility. This simple filter freed him from reacting to insult, fortune, or chaos. When most people get pulled into arguments or self-doubt, the Stoic remains clear because he sees the shape beneath the shadows. But let's not make this seem mystical. You can train this, not with jargon, but with quiet habits. For instance, there are simple memory exercises like the dual N-back game that challenge your ability to hold and update different pieces of information. They're not just games, they're sharpeners, tools to remind your mind how to stay awake. But the greatest training doesn't come from apps. It comes from doing the hard thinking you usually avoid. Next time you're frustrated, instead of venting, ask, what's actually bothering me? Next time you're stuck, ask, what am I assuming must be true? When you strip away your pride, fear, or mental laziness, what remains is something clean, something sharp. That's clarity. It doesn't mean you'll always know the answer, but it means you'll stop pretending, you'll stop following borrowed opinions and start trusting your own reason. The warrior who masters this form of intelligence doesn't react, he reflects. He doesn't get tangled in appearances, he returns to essence. And you already hold that ability, but it must be trained. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you resist the pull to argue just to win, every time you ask, what is this really about? You are walking the Stoic path of discernment. So here's your quiet challenge. This week, face one problem not with panic or performance, but with principle. Strip it to its roots. Question it. Rebuild your response from what truly matters. Then act. Not as someone chasing control, but as someone rooted in clarity. If that speaks to you, type essence in the comments. And if this kind of quiet strength is what you've been looking for, subscribe, because we're just getting started. Now that we've explored the three pillars of true intelligence, perception, imagination, and clarity, it's time to bring them to life. Let's begin where this wisdom becomes real, in the way we see, connect with, and protect ourselves from others. Let's talk about relationships. 1. See people as they are. Have you ever looked back on a friendship, a romance, or even a brief conversation and realized that the person in front of you was showing you who they were the whole time, but you just didn't want to see it? You ignored the signs. You filled the silence with hope. You gave the benefit of the doubt, even when the doubt was all you had. We suffer most in relationships, not because people change, but because we refuse to see clearly. And the Stoics knew this well. If someone shows you their character, said Epictetus in different words, believe it. Don't build illusions on fragments of kindness. Don't confuse charm for depth. The warrior doesn't fall for surface. He waits, he observes, and he decides not with desperation, but with discipline. This is where practical intelligence becomes your armor. In the chaos of human connection, it protects you from being blinded by sentiment. It helps you spot manipulation disguised as affection, urgency dressed as importance, flattery crafted to control. If someone always speaks well of you but vanishes when life turns hard, that's not support, that's decoration. When someone praises your dreams but plants seeds of doubt beneath every compliment, that's not concern, that's sabotage. I remember a story once shared by a mentor. A young man was dating someone who seemed perfect, kind, attentive, always smiling. But every time he shared good news, she grew quiet. Every time he felt proud, she reminded him to stay humble. At first, he thought she was grounding him. Later, he realized she was clipping his wings. It wasn't obvious, but over time, he felt smaller, dimmer, like he had to apologize for shining. That wasn't love. That was control. Practical intelligence doesn't teach you to hate others. It teaches you to stop lying to yourself. It gives you the power to observe without illusion. The discipline to detach when respect is missing. The strength to walk away, not in anger, but in truth. But what about the creative side? In relationships, creative intelligence isn't about surprise gifts or poetic words. It's about emotional fluency, the ability to see patterns, shifts, and unspoken signals. The way a person avoids hard conversations, the tone that changes when they feel insecure, the silence that screams louder than any insult. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." But that doesn't mean we ignore our instincts. It means we learn to separate fantasy from fact, to stop loving what could be and instead meet people where they actually are. Let's imagine another story. A woman marries a man who seems stable, loyal, generous. But over time, she notices small withdrawals. He stops asking how her day was, stops encouraging her goals. He's not cruel, just absent. Many would rationalize it. She doesn't. She applies creative discipline, not by overanalyzing, but by calmly observing. She changes her approach, not with accusations, but with clarity. She gives him space to re-engage. When he doesn't, she lets go, not with drama, with peace. This is creative intelligence in relationships. The art of adapting not to force change, but to honor your own awareness. You become someone who adjusts without losing yourself. You don't demand love, you detect its absence and decide accordingly. And finally, rational clarity. This is your anchor. When emotions rise, when longing blinds you, when ego says I can fix them, clarity cuts through. You ask, is this connection built on truth or on projection? You ask, would I accept this behavior if it came from a stranger? You ask, am I nurturing growth or enabling decay? That's what clarity gives you. Not detachment from love, but protection from self-betrayal. The Stoics never told us to isolate. They told us to choose wisely. Because every bond you form either sharpens your soul or dulls it. So apply your intelligence here first, in who you trust, in what you tolerate, in how you listen, not to their words, but to your own quiet knowing. Relationships will test you. They will tempt you to lower your standards, to abandon your instincts, to trade truth for temporary connection. But you are not here to be chosen by everyone. You are here to walk with those who recognize the strength in your silence, the depth in your stillness, and the clarity in your presence. And when you do, you'll see. This intelligence isn't just a skill, it's self-respect in motion. Now let's explore how this same intelligence shapes your work. Not your job title, but the deeper labor of purpose and contribution. 2. Work with purpose, not pressure. Have you ever stared at your screen late at night, surrounded by deadlines, notifications, and the quiet ache of wondering, does any of this even matter? You show up, you work, you perform, and still there's this dull weight pressing on your chest, like you're running someone else's race with no finish line in sight. The Stoics would not have called it burnout. They would have called it misalignment, because what exhausts the soul is not work, it's work without clarity. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." And in the modern world, nowhere is time more wasted than in labor divorced from meaning. This is where your intelligence must wake up, not to hustle more, but to pause and think. Practical intelligence helps you navigate the games of the workplace, the politics, the praise that hides agendas, the chaos dressed as urgency. It reminds you that not every meeting deserves your energy, that not every title grants wisdom, and that the loudest voice is rarely the one you should follow. A young professional once told me he kept switching jobs because he thought the problem was the environment. Each time, the culture was toxic, but after the third leap, he paused. Not out of despair, but out of exhaustion. And in that stillness, something shifted. He stopped asking what company would value him and started asking what kind of value he wanted to create. Instead of chasing external validation, he began mastering one skill, one that no economy could devalue. Within 2 years, he built a quiet reputation for clarity, precision, and calm under pressure. He didn't have more credentials. He had more alignment. That's practical wisdom at work. Seeing beyond the surface, deciding with long-term consequence in mind. Working not just to meet goals, but to train your mind to endure discomfort, refine effort, and conserve energy for what actually matters. Now think about creative discipline in your labor. It's not about brainstorming sessions or flashy ideas. It's about your ability to see beyond the routine, to question not only what you do, but why you're doing it the way you are. Picture an architect handed a blueprint for a building. He could follow it perfectly, or he could pause, ask who will live there, how the light moves through the space, how the silence of morning should feel in that room. That extra layer, vision tied to function, is creative intelligence in action. Seneca said, "To the person who does not know where he wants to go, no wind is favorable." Most people work like boats drifting with whatever tide pays them. But you can steer. You can ask what rhythm of work brings out your depth. You can reject the lie that more is always better, and instead choose better that lasts over, faster that fades. And what of rational clarity? In work, it is your compass. It helps you decide when to speak and when to observe. When to challenge and when to concede. It filters your pride. When someone disrespects you, it asks, is this worth the battle? When a project fails, it asks, what truth am I avoiding? Imagine someone climbing a corporate ladder only to find the top leads to nowhere. That's not failure, that's a lack of clarity from the beginning. Rational intelligence doesn't just help you succeed, it helps you question whether the mountain is worth climbing at all. The warrior in the modern world is not the loudest or most ambitious. He's the one who can walk into noise and not lose himself, who can toil in obscurity without craving applause, who can build with quiet hands because he's already made peace with who he is becoming. So ask yourself, not what job do you want, but what kind of rhythm do you want to live by? What pain are you willing to endure because the purpose beneath it is real? That's where the Stoic mind shines. It doesn't work for praise, it works for peace. And when you begin to align your practical decisions, your creative insight, and your rational clarity into your labor, you don't just become productive, you become purposeful. You create something no one can take from you, integrity of effort. But there is one more battlefield where this triad of intelligence becomes sacred. And it's the most difficult one of all, not between you and others, not between you and systems, but between you and yourself. Let's step into the realm of self-mastery. 3. Rule the inner world first. There's a kind of silence we rarely talk about, the kind that follows a moment of brutal self-awareness. It comes late at night or in the middle of a routine task, when a simple question pierces through. Why do I keep getting in my own way? You try, you plan, you even feel inspired, and still you repeat the same patterns. Not because you don't care, but because some part of you still runs on habits you've never examined. The Stoics would never have called this a mental block. They would have called it untrained nature. A mind that hasn't been led, a will that hasn't been exercised. As Epictetus put it, no man is free who is not master of himself. And that's the battle most people avoid. Because it's not external, it's not public, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, invisible, ongoing. Practical intelligence begins here, not with action, but with recognition. You start to notice the small betrayals of the self, the snoozed alarms, the over-promises, the constant reaching for something to distract you from doing what actually matters. These aren't failures, they're signals, and when you finally stop reacting to them with guilt and instead observe them with clarity, a new kind of power starts to emerge. Picture a man who wants to wake up early, not for hustle, not for productivity porn, but simply to own his morning. He sets the alarm, lays out the clothes, but every morning, without fail, he reaches for his phone, scrolls, loses time, then rushes into his day, frustrated. Now, most would say the solution is willpower, but the Stoics would say structure precedes will. A wise man anticipates his weaker self and prepares accordingly. So the night before, he puts the phone across the room. He replaces the dopamine loop with a short walk, not because he hates pleasure, but because he honors purpose more. That's what the practical mind does. It doesn't try to be perfect. It designs conditions that support who you're becoming. Now turn to creative discipline. In the outer world, it solves problems. In the inner world, it reshapes identity. Most people think personal growth is about effort, But true transformation often comes when you stop attacking yourself and start redesigning your path. You work with your tendencies, not against them. Take a woman who struggles with inconsistency. She starts routines, journals, habits, then drops them when life gets chaotic. Instead of shaming herself for being weak, she gets curious. Why not make the routines invisible? She links her journal to her morning coffee. She replaces social media with a short reading ritual by moving the app off her phone. She stops talking about her plans altogether and focuses on building momentum silently. Within a few weeks, the same woman who once doubted her discipline is showing up daily, not by force, but by design. This is what the creative Stoic understands. The path isn't always straight, so bend it in a way that makes walking possible. Instead of trying to fix yourself, you arrange your environment to reflect your priorities. You shape the world just enough to support the shape you're growing into. Then comes the anchor, rational clarity. Perhaps the most difficult form of intelligence because it demands something most people avoid: truth without ego. You begin asking questions not to validate your story, but to challenge it. Why am I really tired? What am I using productivity to hide from? Why do I want this goal so badly? Who am I trying to impress? These are not gentle questions. They're hard. They strip away the glamour of personal growth and force you to look at motive. And yet, it's in these raw questions that you start to see clearly. Not who you project to the world, but who you actually are. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Be tolerant with others, but strict with yourself." That isn't cruelty, it's freedom. Because the more precisely you understand your inner terrain, the less the world can confuse you. Let me tell you a story. A man worked tirelessly to build a six-figure career. From the outside, he looked admirable, driven, productive, focused. But deep down, he was haunted by the feeling that none of it felt real. One evening, he stopped mid-task and asked himself, if no one could see my success, would I still want it? That question ruined him for a moment. Then it remade him. He stripped away every project rooted in resentment, comparison, or revenge. What remained was quiet, honest, something slower, but more aligned. That was the start of his real success. Self-mastery doesn't mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming honest. It means knowing when you're lying to yourself, even with good intentions. It means cutting away excuses, not with violence, but with stillness, with patience, with discipline. You don't become who you want by chasing intensity. You become it by choosing your rhythm, your focus, your aim, every single day. So what now? Start small. Observe one pattern this week that weakens you. Change the conditions that allow it to thrive. Replace one destructive habit, not with another punishment, but with a process that reflects care. You are not your past lapses. You are the choices you repeatedly make in silence. In the end, these three intelligences, clarity, creativity, and structure, are not tools for achievement. They are tools for liberation. When united, they give you something no external validation ever could: a sense of quiet alignment. A life that feels right, not because it's easy, but because it's yours. And that is the deepest victory. Not dominance over others, but dominion over the self. If this message stirred something in you, you're not alone. Type inner strength in the comments and let it echo forward. Subscribe to walk this path with us. Your clarity is growing, and in the next video, we sharpen it even more.